The unexpected war. Jared sat at the worn-out table, staring at the steaming plate in front of him. The small alien granny, who had introduced herself as Granda Omi, smiled warmly, pushing the plate closer. Eat, dear. It's an old recipe from my world. Jared hesitated. His mission was simple: scout the outskirts of New Epsilon Colony, ensure no threats, and report back. Instead, he had stumbled into the home of a tiny, wrinkled alien woman who insisted on feeding him. The cookies smelled familiar. Like cinnamon and honey, but with something else, something he couldn't place. The scent stirred a memory deep in his mind, something almost forgotten. He took a bite. The moment the cookie touched his tongue, his whole body tensed. A rush of emotions surged through him: nostalgia, warmth, sadness, and something deeper, something terrifying. His vision blurred, and for a split second, he wasn't in the dimly lit home of an alien granny. He was somewhere else. A battlefield. Explosions roared. Smoke choked the air. Jared stood in the middle of a war he didn't recognize. He saw humans and alien warriors fighting together, not against each other. Their enemy. Something monstrous, something unseen. His own hands held a rifle, his armor torn. Beside him, a massive alien soldier, a warrior with dark green skin and glowing eyes, let out a battle cry before being torn apart by a shadow-like creature. Jared screamed, falling back as the vision swallowed him whole. With a gasp, he jerked back into reality, the dim glow of Granda Omi's home returning. The cookie was still in his mouth, half-eaten. His hands were shaking. He looked at the alien granny, his breath unsteady. What was that? His voice was hoarse. Granda Omi watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. It's a memory, dear, she said softly. One that doesn't belong to you. Jared's heart pounded. A memory that wasn't his? That wasn't possible. He looked around, suddenly aware of how strange the room felt. The cozy walls, the flickering lights. Were they shifting? Were they real? He tried to stand, but his legs felt weak. His mind screamed at him, something was wrong. What did you do to me? Jared demanded, forcing himself to his feet. His hand hovered near his sidearm. Granda Omi sighed. I was hoping you wouldn't react like this. She stood, much too calm for what just happened. But I suppose it was bound to happen. Jared felt a sharp chill. The warmth of the home vanished, replaced by an eerie silence. Then he heard it. A distant sound. Something was moving outside. Heavy footsteps. A metallic clicking noise. Something was coming. Granda Omi turned toward the door, her face grim. They found you, she whispered. Jared's instincts screamed at him. Who found him? Who was coming? And what had this old alien woman done to his mind? The forgotten truth. Jared's pulse pounded in his ears. The sound outside grew louder. Metal scraping against stone, heavy boots pressing into the dirt. His instincts screamed danger. Granda Omi didn't seem afraid. She simply sighed, moving toward a shelf lined with strange glass jars, filled with ingredients he didn't recognize. Sit down, dear, she murmured, as if the threat outside was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Jared didn't sit. His fingers twitched near his sidearm. Who's out there? His voice was sharp. The old alien woman didn't look at him as she pulled a small, wooden box from the shelf. You've seen something you weren't supposed to see, she said. And now, they know. Jared's stomach twisted. They. Before he could ask, the front door shook violently, rattling on its hinges. Jared had faced enemies before. Pirates, smugglers, the occasional rogue AI. But this? This was different. Granda Omi remained calm, running a thin finger along the edge of the wooden box. You have two choices, dear, she said. Stay and fight, or leave and learn the truth. The door banged again, this time harder. The entire house shuddered. Jared drew his weapon. His instincts told him to fight, but something deep in his gut screamed that this was bigger than him. He glanced at the wooden box in the alien granny's hands. What's inside? She opened it. A small, silver sphere rested inside, pulsing faintly with a soft blue light. The moment Jared's eyes landed on it, his mind cracked open. Suddenly, he was somewhere else. A city of impossible architecture, glowing towers reaching toward the heavens. The streets were filled with aliens and humans alike, walking together, laughing, talking. Peaceful. And then, it all burned. Fire rained from the sky. Ships, too sleek to be human, too sharp to be natural, descended like falling stars. A shadow spread across the land, consuming everything in its path. Jared could feel the screams, even though no sound reached him. He could smell the smoke, taste the metallic tang of blood in the air. And at the center of it all, a figure, standing among the flames. Not human. Not alien. Something else. Watching. Waiting. Jared's mind snapped back into his body. He staggered, nearly dropping his weapon. The silver sphere was glowing in his hands. His breath came in short gasps. That wasn't a dream. That was real. That happened. He looked at Granda Omi, his heart hammering against his ribs. What did you just show me? The door slammed open. Jared spun, weapon raised, but nothing was there. The air itself rippled, like heat distortion in the desert. The house flickered, as if it wasn't real at all. Granda Omi sighed again, her shoulders slumping. Too late, she whispered. Jared turned back to her, but she was gone. Only the silver sphere remained, still pulsing softly in his hands. And then, behind him, something breathed. Echoes of the lost war. The breath behind him wasn't human. It was slow, deep, and wrong, like air being sucked through metal lungs. Jared turned. Fast. His instincts screamed move, but his body locked up the moment his eyes landed on it. A towering, shifting figure stood in the doorway. Its form wasn't solid, it shimmered, like it existed between this world and another. A humanoid shape, but its features blurred and twisted, as if reality itself struggled to define what it was. Jared's grip tightened on his gun, but something inside him knew, bullets wouldn't work on this thing. The silver sphere in his hand pulsed harder, the glow turning from soft blue to a dangerous white. The creature tilted its head, its featureless face focusing on the sphere. Then, it spoke. Not with words. With memories. Fire. Screaming. A sky filled with falling ships. Jared was there again, not just seeing the war but feeling it. He wasn't himself anymore. He was someone else. His hands gripped something heavy, not a gun, but a blade. A weapon humming with energy, crackling in the air. His armor was thick, scarred from countless battles. And beside him, an army of humans and aliens alike stood against the impossible enemy. A shadow army. Creatures with shifting, unstable forms. Like the thing standing in front of him now. Jared felt the ground shake as the battle raged around him. He could hear the voices, commands, cries of pain, desperate calls for backup. But through it all, one voice rose above the rest. A leader's voice. A commander's voice. Jared turned toward the sound, his heart pounding. And saw himself. Not the man he was now. The man he had been. The truth crashed down on him like a collapsing building. This wasn't just a memory. This was his past. Jared snapped back to reality, gasping. He stumbled backward, his body drenched in sweat. The creature in the doorway didn't move. It just watched him, its body still flickering, unstable. The silver sphere in his hands dimmed, the glow fading to a soft, steady pulse. "Who am I?" Jared whispered, the weight of the question crushing him. The creature finally took a step forward. Its form shifted, its edges hardening, becoming more stable. And for the first time, Jared saw a glimpse of what it truly was. A soldier. A warrior like him. Not human. Not alien. But something, in between. Something that had fought beside him in that forgotten war. Something that had died. Jared's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't an enemy. This was a ghost. A remnant of a war the universe had erased. A war Jared had once fought in. And now, it was coming back. The creature raised a hand, toward him. Not in attack. In recognition. "Welcome back, Commander." The words weren't spoken. They were felt. And deep inside him, something woke up. The forgotten soldier. The warrior. The man he had been before the war was lost. Jared remembered. And that changed everything. The return of the dead. The moment Jared's mind cracked open, reality shifted. The air around him rippled, distorting like heat waves on burning asphalt. He could hear whispers, voices from a life he had forgotten, his own voice among them. The creature before him stood still, waiting. Its form no longer flickering. It had taken shape. And now, Jared knew why. It wasn't a monster. It was a soldier. One of his. And that meant the war wasn't just a vision from the past. It was happening again. The memories rushed in like a flood. He was Commander Jared Rail, leader of the Last Legion, humanity's final defense against an enemy that was never supposed to return. But they did. And he had been the one to seal them away. At a cost. His life. His soldiers' lives. Their sacrifice had erased the enemy from existence. Or so he had thought. But now. They were back. And he was alive again. Why? The creature finally spoke, not in words, but in thoughts, echoes of the past. "You locked us away, Commander. But the seal is breaking." Jared felt the weight of those words deep in his chest. His own memories were proof. The visions weren't random. They were warnings. A war that should have been over was about to begin again. And this time, they weren't ready. A sharp, metallic click echoed through the air. Jared turned fast, instinct kicking in. His gun was up before he could think. Someone else was there. Not a soldier. Not an ally. Something else. A figure wrapped in darkness, its shape barely holding together, its very presence warping the space around it. The enemy. It had come for him. Jared didn't hesitate. The silver sphere in his hand pulsed, and instinct took over. He moved before he could think, his body acting on old memories, forgotten skills buried deep in his bones. A flick of his wrist. A silent command. The sphere expanded, shifting into a blade of pure energy, crackling with blue-white fire. His weapon. The weapon of the Last Legion. The shadow creature lunged. Jared met it head-on. Their clash sent shockwaves through the air, shaking the very fabric of reality. Sparks flew as the energy blade cut through the darkness, forcing the creature back. For the first time, the enemy hesitated. Because it recognized him. Not as the man he was now. But as the warrior he used to be. Jared grinned. "Miss me?" And then, he attacked. The blade of the lost. The moment Jared's blade met the shadow's form, the universe cracked. Not physically. Not in a way that could be seen with the eyes. But something deep, cosmic, ancient, something that had been sealed away for centuries, fractured. The shadow reeled, its body twisting, screaming without sound. Jared pressed forward, his instincts guiding him, his body moving with the muscle memory of a war he had fought but never remembered. Until now. The blade in his hand wasn't just a weapon. It was his key. A remnant of the old war. A piece of a past that should have been erased. A weapon that should have never existed again. And yet, here it was. Here he was. Why? The shadow shifted, its wounds already closing. It had learned. Adapted. Just like they always did. Jared's grip tightened. He had seconds to finish this before it became unstoppable. But something changed. The silver sphere, the blade, flickered. A pulse of energy rippled through the room, through his arms, through his mind. And in that instant, Jared was somewhere else again. A ruined battlefield. The sky burned red, and the ground was littered with bodies, human, alien, and something else. Jared stood at the center, his armor cracked, his weapon dim. He wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him. Not human. Not alien. She was something in between. Something like him. She turned to him, her silver eyes burning. They will return. Jared's heart pounded. Her voice, he knew that voice. The memory shifted. She lifted her hand, touching his chest, right where his heart should be. But where, even now, there was only silence. You will, too. The memory shattered. Jared was back, his body jerked, his blade pulsing wildly, its energy unstable. And in that moment, the shadow struck. Jared barely dodged, the force of the attack sending him crashing into the far wall. Pain exploded through him, but it was distant, a ghost of something he should have felt. His mind was still reeling. The woman in his vision, who was she? Why did she say he would return? And why did it feel like he never truly left? The shadow lunged again. This time, Jared was ready. He rolled aside, the creature's attack missing him by inches. The blade in his hand flared to life again, more stable, more controlled. This wasn't about strength. It was about understanding. Jared exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the memories, the echoes of who he had been. This enemy had wiped out entire worlds. Had nearly erased him from existence. Had nearly won. But if he was back, it meant there was still one last chance. Jared moved. Fast. His blade sliced through the air, cutting clean through the shadow's form. This time, it didn't heal. This time, it screamed. This time, it died. The moment the creature fell, its body disintegrating into mist, Jared felt something shift. The silver blade in his hands pulsed one last time. Then vanished. Gone. Jared staggered, catching himself against the wall, his breath unsteady. The room around him felt different. The air was heavier, thick with something ancient, something unseen. And then, behind him, a voice. Soft. Familiar. You weren't supposed to wake up yet. Jared turned. Standing in the doorway was Granda Omi. But she wasn't alone. And she wasn't the same. The woman who wasn't there. Jared's breath caught in his throat. Granda Omi stood in the doorway, her small frame barely casting a shadow in the dim light. But the thing beside her wasn't small. It loomed, tall and silent, its body wrapped in something not quite cloth, not quite mist. Its face was hidden beneath a veil that seemed to shift when Jared tried to focus on it. And then there was her. The woman from his visions. The one who had stood beside him in the war. She wasn't in his head anymore. She was here. She stepped forward, her silver eyes locking onto his. You're awake too soon, she said softly. This was not supposed to happen. Jared's grip on his weapon tightened. What the hell does that mean? His voice was hoarse, but his mind was racing. Omi sighed, stepping closer. It means, Dear, she said, her voice gentle, that you were supposed to stay dead. Jared's body went cold. He didn't flinch when an enemy charged him. He didn't freeze under fire. But this? This was different. His own memories were still piecing themselves together, fragments from a past life that had been buried for centuries. He had been a commander. A warrior. He had fought against an enemy so terrible that the universe itself had erased them. And now? He wasn't supposed to be here. Omi looked at him with something that wasn't quite sadness, wasn't quite regret. We sealed you away, she said softly. For your own good. Jared felt the words like a bullet to the chest. We. Not just Omi. The woman beside her, the one from his memories. She had known him. Had fought beside him. And she had been the one to bury him. The room felt too small. The walls too close. Jared stepped back. I don't understand. The veiled figure moved, slow and deliberate, like a shadow bleeding across the floor. You will, it whispered. Then the world split open. The walls melted away, the ceiling vanished. One moment, Jared was inside a simple home. The next, he was standing on the edge of a ruined battlefield. A place that had no right to exist. But it did. And now, Jared was here again. The end of the war. Bodies lay in the dust. Towers crumbled in the distance, their spires bent and broken like the bones of a dead giant. The air was thick with ash and silence. And at the center of it all. Himself. Not as he was now. As he had been before. Tall. Armored. A warrior of the last legion. His blade, still glowing with the power of the silver sphere, was buried deep in the heart of something monstrous. And standing beside him. Was her. The woman from his visions. The woman standing before him now. The past and present collided. Jared's breath hitched. He looked at her, his throat dry. You were there. She nodded, her silver eyes unreadable. You were the one who killed me. Her expression didn't change. Yes. Jared felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. The memories came back in a rush, too fast, too sharp. The war had ended with a sacrifice. Not just his. The entire legion. Their weapons had been too weak. Their armies too small. The only way to stop the enemy was to seal it away. So they had. And the key to that seal had been him. They had buried him with the enemy. Locked him inside a prison beyond time. And now. Something had broken it open. Jared's hands shook. He wasn't just a soldier. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a grave. And his return meant something terrible had happened. The seal was breaking. And if it did, the war would start again. Omi's voice was soft, but unyielding. We didn't want you to wake up, dear. Because if you did. She trailed off, looking toward the horizon. Jared followed her gaze. And for the first time, he saw it. A shape, rising from the ruins. A shadow too large for the sky, too ancient for the stars. It was coming. Jared's fingers curled into fists. He had fought this war once before. He had lost everything. But if this was happening again, then he knew what had to be done. He turned to the woman, the one who had buried him. His voice was steady when he spoke. Give me my blade. The war that shouldn't be. The air cracked with energy. Jared felt it deep in his bones, the pull of something ancient, powerful, and unfinished. The war that should have ended centuries ago was waking up, and he was at its center. He turned to the woman, the one who had buried him. Her silver eyes held no fear, only acceptance. You don't have a choice, she said softly. You never did. Jared's jaw clenched. He hated that she was right. The moment he woke up, the moment he remembered, his fate had already been decided. He had one purpose. To end the war. For good. He held out his hand. "Give me my blade." She hesitated for only a second. Then, with a slow breath, she raised her hand. And the universe answered. The sky split open. A surge of pure light erupted from her palm, twisting and coiling, taking shape. Jared could feel it, his weapon, his legacy, his past. The silver blade forged from a war that had erased time itself. It materialized before him, humming with power. But something was different. Jared knew the shape of his weapon. He had wielded it before. It had been a thing of order, of balance. Now, it crackled with instability. The seal had been broken. And so had he. Jared gripped the hilt. The moment he did, his mind fractured. Not with pain. Not with fear. With truth. He saw it all. The war. The reason behind it. The thing rising from the ruins. It wasn't just an enemy. It was the first mind. A being older than time itself. A force that had existed before life, before the stars, before the universe had even drawn its first breath. And it wanted everything back. The last legion had fought to stop it. They had failed. So instead, they had sealed it away, burying themselves along with it. Jared had been the key, the lock, the price. But now, he was awake. And so was it. The ground trembled. A voice, no, something beyond a voice, spoke through the air. You were not meant to return. Jared smirked. Yeah. Well, neither were you. Then he charged. The battle was chaos. The creature, the first mind, wasn't physical. It was a force. A concept. A hunger. Jared's blade clashed against nothing and everything at once. Every swing sent out ripples of energy, tearing apart reality itself. The battlefield wasn't just a battlefield anymore. It was collapsing. Memories and time shattered around them. He saw flashes of other lives, other versions of himself that had fought this battle before. But they had all failed. He gritted his teeth. Not this time. He wouldn't fail again. The silver blade burned brighter, hotter. It was reacting to him. To his choice. Because that was the one thing the first mind couldn't understand. Choice. It was eternal, all-knowing, all-consuming. But Jared? Jared was human. And humans did something no god, no ancient being, no eldritch force could ever predict. They changed. With a roar, he plunged the blade forward. Not into the creature. But into himself. The first mind screamed. Jared felt everything. The war. The sacrifice. The truth. He had been the key to the seal once. Now, he was making a new one. A choice that had never been made before. The blade absorbed the first mind's energy, twisting reality around it. Jared became the lock. Not because he was forced to. Because he chose to. Light exploded. The battlefield vanished. The war ended not with destruction, but with acceptance. Jared wasn't gone. But he wasn't here anymore, either. He was everywhere. A guardian. A seal. A legend. The first mind was contained once more. And this time. It would never escape. Granda Omi watched the last echoes fade. The war was truly over. For the first time in eons, the universe was safe. She exhaled softly. Rest now, dear, she whispered. You've earned it. And for the first time. Jared did.